Everybody, welcome to another episode of the program. Today we're going to examine two different archaeological sites that in which LiDAR was used to map out and image the geography underneath the dense canopy of the jungles in their respective locations. So the first place we're going to look at is in the southern part of the Amazon Basin, known as the Kasarabe settlements. And these were, I think they were the first real legwork was being done about 20 or some odd years ago by the team of from the University of Bonn. The guy's name is Heiko Prumers, the scientist who he actually discovered two mounds that were located near the village of Kasarabe, which is where they get the name from, in northern Bolivia. So just as a visual here, you can see Bolivia down here. It's the northern part of Bolivia, which happens to be the southern part of the Amazon Basin that you can see here. So we're down in this region over here, and this is, again, very thick canopy, very thick overgrowth at a lot of these sites here. And so LiDAR was used again, and I think it's very interesting technology. If you haven't seen my other episodes, I would refer you to. I've got a lot of episodes going through all these different sites that LiDAR has imaged, and we kind of discuss the conclusions and what they discovered because of being able to see this aerial view of the layout of what was once these large settlements. So this area, for the longest time, experts and archaeologists thought that there was no way that they had long-term settlements here, because it's constantly raining and flooding, and there's just no way that, in their eyes at the time, that they could, without clever technology to help them, there's no way that they could have had a long-term settlement there, because a permanent settlement without the aid of this technology was viewed as impossible. So Heiko Prumers, again, he was very skeptical of this, and ever since he found the mounds, he was convinced that there was something else going on. And for 20 years after that, he just thought that spending the money and time and effort to investigate the area would probably pay off. And he was right. So this entire area is known as the Plains of Mojos, Llanos de Mojos, which is a tropical savanna that spans more than 4,500 square kilometers. So I think I have an image here. Right here. So this entire area of northern Bolivia is the Plains of Mojos here. So that's that goes without saying, it's a large area, and there were people thriving there beyond just what you would think, hunters, gatherers, and all that stuff. They definitely were a lot more capable than that. And from there's a lot of different possibilities, because already they knew before any of this was done was agriculture. They were agriculturists as well as aquaculturalists, which I think I did an episode on these ancient people in Australia who had these complex aquaculture infrastructure in place. So they definitely had an idea and a strong knowledge, a grasp on how to manipulate their environment to not only adjust to the weather patterns, but to actually sustain these huge population bases and construct these very interesting grid-like canal systems and street systems that very much would look like a neighborhood or some sort of back and forth community that featured trade and all these other things associated with a advancing civilization. So their society had a surprisingly complex socio-political organization with trade flowing back and forth between economic bases. They not only made mounds, but also dug canals, ditches, and causeways. This information was gathered from dozens of archaeological sites, many of which were separated by more than 1,000 kilometers. So there were two big sites that seemed very like they were the central areas, so to speak, with booming populations. And then outside were more smaller yet closely linked communities that probably, just like any other, like a greater Los Angeles, right? It's very sprawling, but there's big city centers, and then there's there's smaller, I guess for lack of a better word, suburban settlements outside of these bigger population centers. Prumers and Betancourt, they decided to map out the extent of this culture using LiDAR. This was used in Olmec and Mayan urban planning, which we'll go over after this, which is the other site that I was talking about before. And they surveyed an area of 204 square kilometers, which again was concentrating on major excavation sites. Because if you don't have that much money, like you want to make sure you want to pick the best sites. And before, there's meticulous planning, obviously, and they knew exactly where to look. And it's once you see the images, it's pretty obvious where you need to look. So he in the aforementioned two bigger popular urban centers, they're called Kotoka and Landiva. And what they did was they mapped out a total of 26 settlements, and 15 of which were already known to exist. So they were looking at these 15, and along the way they found another 11. So that just goes to show how much more is out there that they have not discovered. I think in Graham Hancock's book, America Before, he talked about Guatemala and how, again, they use LiDAR and what they thought was one or two little burial grounds. They ended up finding just these huge sprawling communities where they were, I don't recall if it was metalworking or there was some sort of manufacturing going on of instruments for a bunch of different things, fishing and hunting and stuff like that. So again, LiDAR comes through real strong here. Kotoka and Landiva, they're both over 100 hectares, which is 1 hectare is about 2.5 acres. So that's about 250 or so acres for each area. That's pretty big. A lot bigger than people thought 30, 40 years ago. What he said, what Prumer said in his research paper, he said that the inner defensive structures are only preserved in some sections, which may suggest that when the site grew, ramparts were adapted accordingly. So they were building fortifications as well. So that's very interesting. They're constructed around large complexes of civic and ceremonial architecture. They found that these complexes built to face north to northwest. It's probably indicative of some sort of cosmological / astrological or astronomical view. And you can see these in other archaeological sites too, like in Armenia or in Egypt, like the Orion correlation. So this is not new to archaeologists, that people on the ground were somehow in tune with what was above in the sky, and they would build things accordingly. And this type of uniform orientation exists in their burial mounds as well, the Kasarabe culture burial mounds. So this is some very deep-seated traditions that they have here, which again is indicative of a lot of not only free time but stability, long-term stability. And you can only get that if you have stable food system, trade. Obviously, politically, it's not chaotic. So that's very, in and of itself, that's advanced. So some of the second category settlements were a lot smaller, like I mentioned before, between 21 to 41 hectares. I mean, those are still huge. These sites feature civic ceremonial architecture, which were built upon base platforms. And then the third and fourth categories are smaller. And then the fifth category are ones that are hypothetical. So these are some like some that they extrapolate just based on what's there. These are some other settlements that that they assume were probably there but weren't exactly detected through LiDAR. Most of the settlements seem to have been built within 10 kilometers of each other. The eastern region of the Mojos Plains is significantly denser than the other regions, with the average distance of settlements dropping to between 1.8 to 4 kilometers. So again, these settlements were organized in clusters, and they were connected via causeways and canals. So this is a picture of the Mojos de Llanos, and you can see some of the canals there that are kind of cut into the land there. Very interesting stuff. But of course, when you go to the two bigger centers, the canals are in higher number, and they radiate in all the cardinal connections, connecting with lower tier sites, the Ibari River to the south and the lakes to the east. And there's a ton of rivers, but yeah, that's a very prominent river. And one of the canals is longer than 7 kilometers. So again, their engineering level was probably levels of magnitude higher than what they originally thought decades ago. What LiDAR is doing is kind of demystifying the mystery, so to speak, the shroud of unknownness of pre-Columbian life in this area. And there are still uncontacted tribes in there that more information is being extrapolated from oral traditions and such, and the languages and their traditions that they practice on a daily basis. So this is very much a mosaic an endeavor in putting together the mosaic from these different disciplines, and to try to construct this larger view of what the hell is going on at this time, at this place in the Amazon. And we've talked about a bunch of things like terra preta, other aspects of their culture that are just seemingly unexplainable. So he says here at the end, at the regional level, the LiDAR data combined with previous archaeological reconnaissance and remote sensing data show that Kasarabe culture has a highly integrated, continuous, and dense settlement system. And so again, like we mentioned before, this brings up a lot of larger questions about their, not only their place in the whole in that time period, but how big are we talking? This culture? Because maybe Kasarabe, maybe they only occupied just this part of the Amazon, just the southern part, but who knows? Maybe they're completely other loose confederations, or maybe countries or tribes that were along that same technological parallel. But maybe they were just identified as another group of people. No one really knows for sure. It probably wasn't as uniform as like the West now or something like that, but it could very well mean that the fact that those causeways and the fact that they were able to manipulate the water levels, and in case of a flood, they had certain measures in place to address those issues. The fact that they're able to do that as a culture it indicates some sort of complexity that is beyond just hunter and gatherers, without a doubt, for sure. And I think anybody, when presented with the evidence, can kind of come to the same conclusions. It's not really that groundbreaking, especially once you see all these new sites coming into being discovered and coming into the academic consciousness, so to speak. They are of much larger scale than the settlements built along the Andes Mountains, as well as southern Amazonia in general. So the architecture found in both these two sites may well have required the greatest amount of skilled labor of any construction from the same time period in the entire continent. So yeah, like I was saying, it seems like they were well ahead of the curve among their contemporaries, but maybe we just haven't found enough remnants from their contemporaries to say that maybe they were all around the same level of advancement. but we're just getting like a piecemeal version of it. As as time goes, we'll probably get more and more, or we'll most likely get more and more information to kind of cross-examine with this. So that about does it for this part of for these two sites here. So the other site I wanted to talk about were this Olmec and Mayan site, which is in southern Mexico, in the Tabasco region, and probably the western part of Guatemala as well. And again, looking with lasers, the researchers discovered that many Olmec and Mayan ruins seem to have been constructed from the same blueprint. So very, very striking similarities in their architecture and the way they went about building these sites. The layouts of ancient temples can tell us a lot about the interplay between Olmec and Mayan cultures. Comparing temple complexes using laser scans, researchers revealed astounding similarities in their architectural makeup. So this comes from the paper from Nature, as was the previous article as well. And again, they're using LiDAR and they're finding out new bits of information here and comparing them to other sites. So they found out that their own urban centers were using a grid system just like every other settlement that they found using LiDAR since. We can start seeing a pattern here. Ancient urban planners made their decisions based on religion above all else. And I guess with religion, you can lump cosmology in there as well. Another site that I failed to mention before, like the Nazca lines, they found out that there's a lot of those had some sort of astrological, I suppose, corollaries, because you can't even tell. They can't even tell what those things were until they flew up in the air with an airplane to take a picture of it. So, what's that about? If these people were only constrained to the land, how could they conceive of creating such striking imagery that could only be recognized if you're far away up high? So that in and of itself is a conundrum, but I digress. So while many pieces of ancient architecture managed to survive into the present, hardly any city was preserved in its entirety, since spatial configuration is predicated not on the characteristics of individual buildings, but their relationship to one another. Researchers often need to acquire every separate piece before they can start assembling the puzzle. Yeah, like basically what I was saying before, just hitting it home using LiDAR. They were able to start assembling these puzzle pieces, so to speak. So the oldest Olmec city is La Venta, I believe, which dates back between 2500 to 400 BC, which there was a recent article that I did not go over, which definitively put even the mainstream even concedes that the earliest settlements were probably like 26,000 BC or so. So it's highly likely that there are people who were there before the Olmecs. But again, these dates we're dealing with the mainstream of the mainstream here. So don't get mad in the comments or anything like that. Actually, go ahead and get mad in the comments. That's fine. Just stir up some discussion. San Lorenzo is the oldest known Olmec site. Okay, I was wrong. It's not La Venta. It's San Lorenzo. That hints at the existence of a society that reached state-level complexity. So again, state-level complexity is another word for what we were talking about before, which is just all this infrastructure that exists, which makes it apparent that there is a level of complexity. And the state-level complexity, I'm assuming, just connotes that there was a population for a state to be in charge of some version of a state. Consists of a large flat plateau, which again, a lot of plateaus are good. They're good places to scan LiDAR and stuff, because that's usually where the biggest settlements are. One archaeologist suggested the plateau had been shaped deliberately like a bird. That some people have talked that it's just erosion, it's just happenstance, but that's something to think about, though. I wouldn't put it past them to have done that. I mean, look at in North America, there's a serpent mound, so that exists. So that definitely wouldn't surprise me if the entire plateau is supposed to look like a bird, especially since the Nazca lines exist as well, and there's tons of bird imagery there. This scientist Inomata, he creates this MUAP, which is the Middle Usu Macinta Archaeological Project, which was the body that was in charge of indexing these sites essentially with LiDAR. So in 2017 near Tabasco, they started uncovering the Mayan Plateau in the shape of a rectangle. It was 399 meters wide, 1,413 meters long. The monument, which was one of the oldest of its kind, may have served as a blueprint for similar structures. So this was previously an unrecognized pattern, and now because they've been able to compare these with other sites, they're starting to see that there's a connection here. This implies the emergence of standardized ceremonial complexes in southern Mesoamerica, which is, again, more complex than previously thought. Here are some pictures of it. So I think this is one of the ruins from San Lorenzo here. This is in La Venta, but yeah, this is what one of the mounds would look like. And if you had LiDAR, or some sort of even ground penetrating radar or anything, that would probably be something you'd want to investigate with sites like this. And here are all the sites in yellow in which the MUAP team used LiDAR to try to come up with an image to connect the two. So yeah, you can see it's the very southern part of Mexico and parts of Guatemala here. So spatial configurations of these complexes were provided by blah, blah, blah. Though costly, this method has proven rather useful for the study of monuments in remote locations where thick vegetation makes it hard to get a good aerial view. Conversely, older and much less accurate ground analyses of these sites failed to pick up on structural similarities that had been there all along. So yeah, this stuff was just, hidden in plain sight, but some of the more minute details, like the structural similarities, no one would ever think to do that unless they had unless it was right there and it was obvious, and LiDAR makes that type of stuff obvious. Cosmological architecture, aside from the main rectangular plateaus, a number of Olmec and Mayan complexes also appear to consist of 20 smaller adjacent plateaus. So again, just think of these platforms that are close to each other, and you would obviously be able to see the correlation. They suggest this construction may have been derived from the Mesoamerican calendar, which was organized not in groups of 7 days but 20, and that would make. And again, you have this this meme here, this pattern here of whatever's in their calendar. They're going to manifest in this case, in the architecture of where they're living, or their ceremonial sites, or whatever significant, culturally significant site they're gonna instill their cosmology on. Which again, that's in terms of civilizations, that's pretty high level. And again, it could be religiously driven, most likely. But yeah, just the fact that they've arrived at that conclusion, and the fact that their whole culture is geared toward that, undertaking these is pretty big endeavor to start creating these mounds and whatever. Who knows what they look like at the time? But these things are made entirely of stone, and very interesting that they're able to do this. And now I think common knowledge is, when someone hears that, they're not so blown away. It kind of makes more sense. Other complexes, particularly those located in mountainous regions, may have been aligned with peaks and volcanoes instead, which makes sense. Whatever is unique in the geography or the landscape, more than likely be hold some sort of significance amongst these people. The study goes on and indicates that builders design their ritual spaces by selectively using various cosmological principles and adjusting them to local conditions. They recontextualize the cultural significance of San Lorenzo's ruins. Yeah, it probably goes way beyond just, oh, these were, because the prevailing view in a lot of these settlements or these archaeological sites is, oh yeah, these people would just come and go. This site wasn't used on a daily basis. They would just come when the weather was permitting, do a few of their rituals, and then go back to being hunter gatherers. And that to me absolutely makes no sense, because why would you be hunter gatherers when you have these canal systems that are designed to not only control the flooding, but harness it to cultivate crops? And why are you growing so much food if you're just being hunter gatherers? Usually if you're growing that much food and you have all this stuff in place, people are living there, and that's what's great about LiDAR. You can see these grids are indisputable. Why else are they here? So yeah, that's about it. Let me know what you guys think. LiDAR is great. If you guys have links to other articles in which LiDAR is used, let me know, and I'll talk to you guys later.